Well, welcome on in. We are having a special catch up for you today on not catch up, catch up on the PWHL Puck Drop podcast. This is the in case you missed it kind of news and discussion. And we are very fortunate to be joined by the deputy managing editor of Eyes on the Prize, Jared Book. He is joining us from Montreal. Hi, Jared.
Hi.
Hi. And please look up Jared on social media and that website. He does a lot of great writing, of course, on the Habs, but a lot of work on the Montreal Victoire and is going to be doing more as this second season gets underway. So, who better to give us, the Montreal side of things and to generally look at the league and everything that's happened since the very successful inaugural season. And we're all just so excited that it's basically here, right? I think we can say it's here. Training camps are opening this week. So, have you missed it, Jared? Are you looking forward? Like, of course you're looking forward, but what are your feelings as it gets started?
Yeah, just looking. Yeah, I mean, it's been a long off season. Not as long as the last off season. I mean, that one, getting the league up and running, it felt like it was, take obviously waiting 5 years for it to start. It was a long time, but yeah, I'm looking forward to season two. I was at the rink a couple of weeks ago to talk to Kori Cheverie for a story that I did, and
Yes.
it just felt really good to get back, see some of the players on the ice before they had gone to the rivalry series.
Kori Cheverie was, of course, with the Team Canada at the rivalry series. Those folks, the players and the coaches there, have a quick turnaround as they're doing some media work this week and hitting the ice. They're busy, but it was good to see the players. Some of the names from Canada, USA, and some of the European players took part in their tournaments as well. So a little bit of a head start for some of those players, but everybody will be back on the ice starting November 12th. And as far as we know, most of that will be closed practices and scrimmages, and then even into the mini camps, correct?
Yeah, yeah, it's not much is open to the public. I know, uh, in Montreal they're not necessarily closed practices, but it's not really something where anybody can just show up. And the preseason games, I believe, are also going to be closed to the public as well, like they were in Utica last year.
Right.
So it's going to be just getting in shape. Maybe they're going to try some new things out, new rules, new things like that that they don't want people necessarily to see because it's
Mm-hmm.
not going to represent real hockey. But we'll see what happens. But looking forward to just everything getting underway, seeing some familiar faces again, and hockey will be here back before we know it.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. There are a lot of, new players to integrate, some camp tryout players and, a new coach and new arenas. I don't know if the New York team has a new practice arena, but at least, they're getting off into New Jersey. There are a lot of things that players have to adjust to. Sometimes we forget about that side of things. The European players that are coming over are making very big life changes and let alone getting used to their new hockey teams. So we want to catch up real quick. We'll start with something that's the new news because it's been on the front of everybody's mind, the logos and the jerseys. We did get the logos back in September. The Good Morning America and the breakfast television, all that was one news blitz. And then literally just last week, we got the jerseys. So I already did a lot of reacting online. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it was nice to see some unique combinations of color and things like that, but also staying true to the season one colors. I think if you just turn on a game, it'll be familiar to anybody who watched the game last year. You can still wear those old jerseys and they won't look out of place as well. So I think they did a good job of kind of threading the needle of staying true to what they were in season one, but giving each team a new, an identity, a brand, and a logo, and I think that's
Yeah.
going to be I think it's going to be really exciting, and take away some of the criticism that was there in season one. It really faded once the game started, I feel. But you know, now no one can complain about them having no names. They could just complain about them being bad names. It changes a little bit, but like anything, I think once they start getting used and they become part of the vocabulary of PWHL and hockey in general, I think everything will be fine. I mean, you know, there's a lot of weird names in sports that are just
Yeah.
second nature now,
Yep.
and I think that's going to happen here as well.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think overreacting is just, natural for sports fans,
It's the
any
social
sport.
media age, the social media age, right?
you know,
Anger takes precedence.
just yes.
Uh,
Like this isn't perfect. And I wish this was I did some of that. I did with the Montreal, I just think Montreal won. I even said they lapped the field with the logo and the jerseys. Just so good looking. And of course, but I had to have a quibble, which was the powder blue. And then I know there was a reason for that, but that was my slight quibble. But do you agree that Montreal, I mean, without bias, if you can, were you just like, oh, these are nice?
yeah, I think I really liked I wasn't a fan of the maroon going into season one. I was
Uh-huh.
like, that's weird. You know, I thought they were, you know, not that you want to copy the men's team, but I think that there's a certain connection that could be made there with the colors. But by the end of the season, I absolutely loved it. I'm happy they kept the maroon. I'm happy they kept the cream.
Yep.
The cream is such a it gives the Montreal team a sense of history without there actually being
Yes.
history, which I think is you know it connects to the name too because that's based on history as well.
Yes.
Yeah, and I do like that they changed some of the colors, the gray to like a darker blue. I actually like the powder blue, especially on the road jerseys. I think that
Yeah.
it really fits in well there. If the biggest problem we have is a little stripe on the jersey, then I did something right, right? So, but
Mhm.
no, I mean, I think all the jerseys look really good and
Yeah.
unique in their own way.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like the same person designed all of them.
Mhm.
I mean, there's a little similarities in the striping on the bottom, but I mean, you know, striping on the bottom is it's hard to make stripes unique. And I think each team tried to incorporate as many colors as
Mhm.
possible as well, which is nice. Even Minnesota with the two-tone purple,
Mhm.
it's one color but still different. So it makes a really interesting dynamic going into season two for sure.
Yeah, and I think you can hear already, even during the rivalry series when they were referring to, player as a Minnesota Frost player or a Toronto Scepters.
Yeah.
I mean, it's already just starting to, take effect and be something that we're used to. Well, since you mentioned Minnesota, I was gonna transition and kind of work our way back to more the beginning of the off season, if that's okay, and then we'll kind of work our way forward. It's going to be loose, but this is to catch up fans that maybe just stopped watching after the Walter Cup was awarded to Minnesota, by the way, and it wasn't too long after that, like a day or two, that we had some controversy with GM Natalie Darwitz being let go, or at least some kind of parting of ways. And it wasn't like, well explained. It wasn't received all that well. It was kind of confusing. And Ken Klee stepped in as the interim GM. And, we just had a few weeks between that and the draft, I think, where it was kind of a lot of unknowns there in Minnesota. What did you make of that?
Yeah, I think you know, obviously the timing wasn't great. You know, they had coming off a championship win,
Yeah.
and everything like that. But I also think that you know these problems were obviously underlying for a while. Maybe had something to do with their 5 game losing streak coming out of the World Championships as well. You know, they won the championship, so people tend to forget about that. But they were very close to missing the playoffs entirely. And I think this was a decision that was made well before the playoffs, well before that that the situation was just you know needed to change, and obviously that's what happened. And yeah, I mean, I can understand why people in Minnesota, especially, were upset by the news. But You know, we're not there day to day. We don't know what the dynamics were like, and obviously, the league felt that something needed to change, and I made that decision. It's just unfortunate timing that it came days after a
Yeah.
championship, but also, that's when the contracts end, right? The contracts end after after that. You have a quick turnaround for the draft and free
Yeah.
agency and things like that. So I think the league was kind of backed into a corner by Minnesota performing so well in the playoffs. But those things happen. I mean, it's odd, but I think that's really why it happened. If we don't know what went on.
Yeah, and so it took them a little while. They got through the draft with Ken Klee, acting as GM. I was at the draft, and there was definitely some booing, some reactions to them drafting Britta Curl, and it seemed like they couldn't wait to get the ship pointed in the right direction. And they do have a new GM in place, Melissa Caruso, who has maybe more of an operations background as far as we can tell. So we're kind of going to watch and see how that plays out. We won't know, of course, the inner workings, but it might seem as though the hockey side or decisions are still a little bit shared by Ken Klee, but it's just an interesting situation. So, Minnesota fans were defensive, other fans were, aggressive. So but uh, rivalries and a little bit of spicy, between them and Boston or them and Toronto and things like that are only kind of make the games more exciting. But so we'll keep an eye on that one for sure. So then the draft, if fans weren't paying close attention, that took place on June 10th, and the awards were also that same week in Minnesota on the 11th for the awards. So, what did you think of the draft overall? I mean, from a Montreal point of view, or in general, no surprise that Sarah Fillier went first overall, and thankfully she did just sign her 1 year contract. And New York seemed to do very well, so their team will be much improved as far as we know. Any other standouts for you?
Yeah, I think the biggest surprise. I think it was pretty much well known that the three forwards were going to go early. Fillier, Daniel Sardakny, Hannah Bilka. I think the biggest surprise was probably uh, that Claire Thompson went to Minnesota at number three.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was a surprise. Not that there wasn't a fit there. I think a lot of people would have expected Bilka or Kayla Barnes there. Boston, I think, was always going to take a forward, and Montreal always wanted defense. That's what they had circled.
Yeah.
It was pretty clear that they would have the choice of one of
Thompson,
Thompson
yeah.
or Barnes, and they were just going to take whichever one was left. Speaking to Montreal people, they were surprised that it was Barnes.
Yeah.
Personally, I was surprised it was Barnes, but I think they'll be really happy with that.
Mm-hmm.
And then Julia Gosling to Toronto. Not a huge surprise, given their Team Canada uh, management team.
Yeah.
But I think that's maybe a little earlier than I would have had her. But I mean, once you get to the first two rounds, anybody could have gone at any point, and you could have been, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Especially after the top five went, I think there was a pretty
Yeah.
distinct top five group that we just mentioned, and then after that, it was pretty much a group of people, and it depends on what you're looking for. So,
Right.
yeah, no real surprises, and really excited to see how everyone fits in.
Mm-hmm. I like seeing Kayla Barnes. I like seeing some of the American Canadian
Mhm.
crossover, but yeah, particularly those three that you mentioned, those three forwards going to, Sarah Philly is going to New York, but Ottawa took Serdachny and Toronto took Gosling. I think um, I was kind of under the impression that maybe the injury to Natalie Spooner had a little bit to do with the Julia Gosling selection. I think they probably wanted her anyway, but I think that kind of confirmed that they wanted somebody like that in their lineup, and there she was. So it seemed to fit really well. I think Serdachny is going to be a great fit in Ottawa. I like seeing her go to that team. And with Kayla Barnes, we don't know about her. Looked like an ankle injury. we're crossing our fingers that it's, I mean, not as serious as it might have looked. A friend that was on the other day talking about the jerseys called it victoire on victoire violence. That unfortunately it was Marie-Philippe Poulin that kind of landed on her, and we're just hoping because there she was posing in the jersey looking so good, and so we just send our best wishes. And then for me, and I would have talked about this whether you were a Montreal reporter or not, but I love the Jen Gardner, Kayla Barnes connection, seeing them behind the scenes when Kayla realized that Jen had, she didn't know until, someone told her, and then Jen was there quickly, and they were just joyful and taking those selfies, and it became a whole story. And when I did have them on the podcast, I know Jen said they had to text and say, like, well, wait, are we actually going to room together? Like, we're making all these jokes, but like, well, yeah, okay, we are. And then they confirmed it. So that was just, obviously Ohio State teammates, and Kayla's dog Hulk is going to join them. So that was just a really, really nice story. I'm sure Kayla will be there and hopefully, rehabbing and ready to join the team shortly. So that's a story maybe you can follow up for us on those two.
Is cool moment, and it's nice to that they know somebody coming to a new
Yeah,
city, and
yeah,
it helps. We talked about the adjustments before. It obviously helps, and yeah, it's will be interesting to see how long Barnes is out, if she's out. She missed the last two games of the rival series, and um, she was traveling with Team USA,
yeah,
so that's in my mind maybe a more positive sign that
yeah.
it wasn't something that needed to be looked after
Right,
instantly.
right.
But obviously, and it's a long season. There's still a few weeks until the season starts, so Montreal had that happen with Erin Ambrose last year, where she missed all of preseason and all of camp, but was ready for the first game of the season.
Hmm.
I'm sure they're hoping that that's the situation
Definitely.
with Barnes, but even then, I mean, playoffs are 7 months away, so even if it is kind of worst case scenario,
There you go.
there is
Glass
a
half
path
full.
forward.
There,
Yeah, even if
keep
it's
it
worst case
positive.
scenario, there's a path there as well. So
Yeah, and speaking of defense, don't forget Montreal fans. Dominika Lashkova is coming back. I don't know if she's right on schedule for training camp, but she was out the majority of last season, so don't forget about her. So their defense is going to look a lot different,
yeah,
and goaltending too is going to be an interesting story, as you mentioned, with drafted a couple of drafted goalies and some camp invites. I think there's going to be some movement there, maybe more in the third goalie, or in some cases, the backup. We had a couple retirements or moves. In Toronto, we're going to see Reagan Kirk come in, probably in place of Erica Howe. By the way, best wishes to Erica Howe in her breast cancer fight. We're thinking of
yeah,
you.
definitely, definitely.
Yeah, and so there's going to be some movement there. Our friend Clara Peslarova is going to Boston as an invite. Montreal has Abstrider. So and everybody was talking about Emerald Smashmeyer maybe taking a little bit of a back seat in Ottawa, but literally the game that she just played in the rivalry series might have changed that storyline a little bit. So any goaltending narratives catching your eye?
I think that teams are going to be a lot more split there this season than they were last season. You mentioned Mashmeyer. She played almost every game for Ottawa. In Toronto, Kristen Campbell played a lot of games there. I think you're going to see a little bit more of a split in those markets. Minnesota obviously had that all through the season and even in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Boston, I think there's a clear number one in Aaron Frankel, but I think that they had a solid number two goalie last year in Soderberg, and she should be expected to play a lot of games as well. So yeah, there's not very many spots for goalies,
Mm-hmm.
and no team had to use a number three goalie last
Yeah.
year. One team did because they wanted to, and that was New York at the
Mm-hmm.
end of the season with their situation there. So yeah, it's it's going to be interesting to see. And obviously, you never want to have an injury to any member of your team, but especially in goal.
Yeah.
But I think that it's something that the league is well placed to have
A
backups there
lot of
when they
depth.
need them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's a case for when there's only six teams. There's more than 12 goalies to go around, and
Hmm.
even more than 18 goalies to go around.
Right.
So I think that's they're in a good place. I don't think there's going to be movement for sure, especially in the number two goalie positions, number three
Hmm.
goalie
Hmm.
positions. Teams are going to look for players, and whether they have them on the roster like they all did last year, or whether they have some on the reserve roster, is going to be
Yeah.
interesting as well. But yeah, I mean, it's I think we'll see some movement there. I think each team's starting goaltender is pretty much still in place, but I think that they'll have a little bit more relief
Right.
going forward. I don't think we'll have Mashmeyer playing as much as she did last year. Not
Yeah.
that she can't do it.
Yeah.
She's used to it, whether it goes back to her CWHL days as well. But and especially Campbell as well. She had a slow start to that season. It's easy to forget now, but she had a slow start to that
Oh,
season
we remember.
as
We
well. So
remember.
so yeah, it's going to be having Reagan Kirk there is going to be
Yeah.
a big change as well there. And
Yeah.
and if
Yeah.
if something happens to a goalie to any team, I think that they'll be pretty confident
Yeah.
that they can still hold water
Yeah.
and go forward.
Yeah. And that, interestingly, I certainly didn't forget because I watched that Toronto, plunge quickly to the bottom and then rise back up. It was quite a story, and definitely Kristen Campbell was part of it. And so she ended up being named the goaltender of the year at the awards, which is just a great story. Well done for her. Who would have thought when she was struggling early on, but she finished with, I think personally, 12 wins in a row when the team had the 11-game win streak. And Toronto, took a lot of the awards. Coach Troy Ryan was named coach of the year. And of course, Natalie Spooner just took everything that probably was available to her, the top forward, the leading scorer, and the Billie Jean King MVP. Her 20 goals in 24 games, 27 points in total. I love to point out that that's the same scoring pace that Austin Matthews was on in the NHL. I don't, who knows if it would have kept up, but I just thought that was really poetic. And I wrote an article in the Hockey News about Natalie hobbling on the crutches with her son Rory at the awards and having to get up over and over with her. I think she had her crutches bedazzled. It was just so poignant. Like, yay, and then just, oh geez, But well done there in the awards, and then of course the Rookie of the Year, Grace Sumwinkle from Minnesota, who I think it was between her and Emma Malte, but I think that's a great choice. And then our favorite Maureen Murphy from Montreal won the Hockey for All award with her community service and I guess over 600 hours of volunteer work. And oh, by the way, she's also getting her law degree, with distance education at Northeastern. So that was mainly the awards that were
Yeah.
handed out, and those were really fun to see. Oh, and did I mention Erin Ambrose? Sorry, a
Yeah.
defender of the year, well deserved. I think I did miss her. Sorry, sorry. I was trying to read them in the order I had them here. So, any surprises there, or comments on those winners?
I don't think there's much surprise. I think Spooner was the clear MVP. I think that you could have made a case potentially for Mary Philip Pillay. You could always make a case for her, I think, and but I think that Spooner was just so dominant that
Yeah,
really you couldn't really argue that one, and I think even Montreal fans would agree with that.
yeah,
And Aaron Ambrose, Defender of the Year, I think was well deserved. She won the last Defender of the Year award in the CWHL as well. So that's like kind of back to back for her.
nice.
And five years apart, but back to back. And the biggest surprise for me was Maureen Murphy. You mentioned all those things that she did off the ice. Nobody in
I
Montreal knew a thing
know.
about that. No one in Montreal media. It wasn't broadcast. It wasn't really talked about. and I think that that's just a testament
Mhm.
to why she's doing it.
Yep.
Um, and obviously it's really cool to see somebody who's not even from here
Mm.
implicate themselves in the community, and
Yep.
talk to her a little bit about it after she won the award. And yeah, I think that that's you know, especially for somebody coming straight out of university to go to a new city and think, oh, I you know, forget about everything else I'm doing in school and the hockey. I want to help people also. And you know, she didn't have any roots here, and she just kind of had
Yep.
to start everything on her own. So yeah, I think that's it's really commendable. And yeah, I mean, rookie of the year, you mentioned, you know, Azam Malte, Alina Mueller as well. Like
Yeah.
you
All
can't, you couldn't
good.
go wrong. There's so much talent in this league,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's, I think this year's going to be even harder to kind of pick a rookie of the year, at least, you know, before we we see any games. But yeah, it's you know, I don't think you can really argue with any of the award winners and any of the really nominees. I think everybody was
Yeah.
really
Yeah. Yeah.
really deserving, no matter which way it went. And yeah, so uh, looking forward to seeing how everyone rebounds for season two.
Yeah, we should have a maybe on social media we can just start a thread of, early betting for rookie of the year. It's easy to say Sarah Fillier, but
Yeah.
the team situation and the role that they take is going to factor into that. And maybe it's a defender who, plays a much needed role on a team, so maybe it is someone like Serdachny who's going to have a big role in Ottawa because they lost Daryl Watts. There are different things. You can't just say, well, Connor Bedard joined and he's the best, and it's just a straight line. I think there could be some interest there. So speaking of Daryl Watts and switching, these segues are just I didn't plan these, but they are maybe I am glancing at things, but it's just reminding me we had a couple of interesting free agent switches. Why don't you, if you have them on your screen or on the top of your mind, why don't you go ahead and tell us? Most of them did resign with their own teams, but some interesting names definitely switched.
Yeah, Toronto was the benefactor, I guess, getting Emma Woods from New York, and Daryl Watts from Ottawa. There's also Emma Greco, who I think went from Minnesota to Boston, I
Mm-hmm.
think.
Yep.
So yeah, not many changes. I think a lot of teams were happy with, you know, the players they had for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's some changes at like the bottoms of the rosters, with camp invites and things like that. But in terms of top players, most of them stayed where they were. I think there's a familiarity there with both
Mm-hmm.
players and teams that were like, yeah, we you know, we could change here, but is it going to be any better? And we might as well bring this person back. So
Yeah.
I think, you know, talking to players, I think they were happy to stay where they were. Teams obviously were happy with some of their players as well. So yeah, it was interesting that we didn't get. I would think maybe we were maybe expecting more player movement, at least a little bit more.
Yeah, I
But
I
I
was
think I think there's, you know, teams are just so, you know, there's not much money to go around, right? In reality of this league right now, in terms of like just the salary cap structure, and I think that that was a factor too, where, you know, teams couldn't really outbid other teams,
right. You
so
unless you're going
it
to
came down
drop a
to
big name, you couldn't sign a
right.
big name. So yeah.
Yeah, and when it comes down to the similar money, you know, players are like us. It's not easy to move,
Yep.
and so you might as well stay where you are. And I think that
Yeah.
that's gonna, you know, I think that we're gonna see more movement. You know, like I said, maybe even during camp with the waiver period, if some players come out of nowhere or things like that. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Now, do note that Toronto freed up freed up. I mean, a couple of their players were immediately grabbed back by Ottawa, which was a sort of
Yeah.
well, if you're going to take our player, they went ahead
Right,
and signed up.
Rebecca Leslie is
Rebecca
one of them, right?
Leslie and
Yeah,
Alexa
yeah,
Vasco. Yeah, Leslie
yeah.
is an Ottawa native, so that's a good fit, and I think she'll do well there. So that's going to be add a little more spice to the rivalry. We're always good for that. And I got to talk to Emma Greco actually with when she visited with the Walter Cup, And like it's just an interesting swap to go from the team that they just beat in the finals, but she didn't make it sound like too big of a deal. She was looking forward to it. She's played in that part of the country with Quinnipiac, and I was also able to ask her about now playing against Michaela Cava, her partner, who did resign with Minnesota. We were kind of curious about that, so that'll be a head to head. So there, just some little storylines here and there as we, tee up each game. Like, oh, tonight we're going to see, Daryl Watts against her old team, or Emma Greco against her old team, and those kinds of things. So okay, we'll just kind of hit quickly some more, just in case folks miss any of the news. The schedule expands to 30 games, and we did have announced a couple of the off-site games. Why don't you mention those if you can?
Yeah, so Montreal and Ottawa will be playing January 19th at the Videotron Center in Quebec City.
Right.
Ottawa and Montreal will be playing also uh, December 6th.
Six.
Yeah, December 6th at the Canadian Tire Center. So it's
Yeah.
Ottawa's first game in an NHL rink, which will be a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
And and there's reports going around that March 1st
Mm-hmm.
game is going to be at the Val Center again, and there's no reason to to believe otherwise.
Yeah.
It's a date that makes sense. Obviously Montreal sold it out last year, so
Yep.
there's no reason not to go back. So
And against
yeah,
Boston, who
yeah,
they owe them a little serving that, those two teams, the rivalries from the playoffs, I think are going to make some of those games really interesting as well. So yeah,
yeah,
you have to go back to the Bell Center. You just, that makes a lot of sense. Probably by the time this
yeah.
comes out, it'll be confirmed, but we'll pencil that one in. And then also quickly, expansion was suddenly dropped in a conference that Amy Shear was at, where she said it is in the works for next season. So basically 2025, 26, which sounds like fast, but the PWHL works fast. So people were speculating right away on which markets, which cities, two new teams. We have no idea what it could look like. But that's exciting. And I cast my vote for, what I thought were some logical cities. I thought, I don't know, I just think keeping it in the, geographical area without going way out west yet. I thought Halifax would be a really good candidate, and maybe like Chicago. I think those were my choices. Some people were saying
Yeah,
Pittsburgh, Detroit.
yeah.
Yeah, no, you go ahead. What did you think?
Yeah, Pittsburgh, Detroit. I think that the four most likely are Detroit, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Washington.
Philadelphia. Oh, okay.
I think those are
But what about a
those are
Canadian
on
city? There
top.
has to be one
Yeah,
Canadian, one.
I don't know if it has to be that way. But obviously there's Quebec City.
Mm-hmm.
There's if they want to start inching out west, there's a lot of markets there that support women's hockey. Edmonton in particular, Calgary had a team there. Vancouver's probably a little bit too far for this expansion,
Mm-hmm.
but I wouldn't be surprised if this league ends up in Seattle and Vancouver
Mm-hmm.
down the road. Maybe not this round,
Right.
but a future round for sure. I think even places like Arizona has been a place where women's don't laugh. I'm
Oh
serious.
no, I
I
that's where that's where I've
yeah
lived, and I saw the Coyotes
yeah
firsthand. But I know it's a great, I played women's hockey there, so
yeah.
I just, it sort of makes me, surprised that that's coming up. But
Yeah, and I think that there's the key will be look where these neutral site games are. We already
mhm,
have one in Quebec City. They've talked openly about expansion. Pittsburgh has talked openly about expansion since they weren't involved in the first six teams. So I think that there's easy dots to connect. But
right, right,
I think every city that's going to be considered either had a game last year or will have a game this year.
okay,
Maybe they'll have them both. Maybe we'll see Pittsburgh and Detroit have another game again
maybe, yeah,
this year. So yeah, I think that that's where you want to look until we have those cities locked down. I think we can speculate openly about all the others, but I think it'll be very interesting to see what
yeah,
happens. And I think year three is the right time because you don't want to do it. year four, just because of the chaos with all the free agents, all those 3-year contracts
Yeah.
ending. A lot of players signed 2-year deals this year
Yeah,
to
that
end
would be
that year as well.
madness.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
that would be like
I
just
think
throw
just for
everybody up in the air and everybody
it'll be
just
like
start
season
over.
one. Yeah, it'll be like just hold the draft all over again, right? No, but I think that, yeah, I think that it makes sense to do it for that year at least to get some more players opportunities,
True.
because every year there's a group of players that are going to come either from the NCAA, and the
Yeah.
talent in the NCAA.
Yeah.
You just if you watch the rivalry series, you know how good they are already, and they're already household names. Um, and I think that from Europe, more players are going to come over once it's become more established as well. We saw a good handful this year.
Hmm.
I think we'll see another handful
Hmm.
next year. Obviously, there's contract considerations to do there as well. So
So we're looking forward to all this. We have a couple more international events, kind of causing a break in the season, and I'll post those. So there's just a lot of hockey now. We can finally get at it, and just to wrap it up, and thank you for speaking with us. I'd love to have you back on again. There's just when once we get the rosters and can actually debate which team looks, stronger and start having those kind of conversations. But is there anything to sum up in one or two bullet points that you're most looking forward to for the second season, Jared?
I think just looking at how they grow, I think that they were. I think even they were probably. I think they'll even admit this, or they have admitted it, that they were kind of caught off guard about how popular they were in season one. And I think it's very interesting to see how that
Mm-hmm.
translates into this season. We're still waiting on broadcast details
Yep.
for season two. I expect a similar thing in Canada to what they had last year. Is it possible that they get a national deal in the U.S. this year? Is there a different streaming option down the road? I think that's going to be very interesting to see. And I have thoughts on that. I'll save them for another podcast,
See,
or
this is why we're
when
going to have
things
you
are
back
announced.
on.
But
Okay.
yeah, no,
You have
it's gonna be
thoughts
very
on
interesting
that.
to
It
see.
sounds like you might
Yeah.
have
Well, I just think that the way things are going, um, there's opportunity for a streaming partner that already exists,
the Whoopi
as opposed to
Goldberg
doing it
network,
those.
or yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
I don't know.
obviously, there's ESPN in the States, but Amazon Prime is
Hmm.
doing more and more sports. They
Yeah.
have a deal in Canada. Could there be something that that could make sense there? I think it's also hard for them to make changes because of how accessible games were as well. So they're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place, and
Right.
they don't want to make it too restrictive either. But I think that they understand that when you're only in 6 markets, women's hockey is becoming a worldwide. There's records being broken everywhere around the world. There's going to be interest in this league, especially as more Europeans come over as well. So
Yeah.
it'll be very interesting to see how they move that, and then I'm expecting a little bit more news on that
Hmm.
going into season two, and maybe bigger news. But it'll be fun to watch.
Yeah. Good. Good. I agree with that. And just from like an on the ice perspective, I'm just so excited to see some of these new names and new
Hmm.
faces and how they all fit in the lineups and the level of talent being raised. And, you know, everybody has draft picks on their own teams that they're excited to see. I'm happy to see all of them and see how they blend and, see how the draft might look in retrospect, based on how the Europeans might do versus some of the NCAA grads, things like that are just like the hockey, who takes off and who surprises us. In a good way or maybe disappointing. The hockey is the part that I can't wait to see the skates hit the ice. So
Yeah.
we will be bringing. I mean, we're going to bring some updates on what's set at training camp and as much as we can dig into there. But thanks for all the time, Jared. We always go a little long. I try to there's just so much to talk about. So I hope folks were able to, stay with us and add their comments, whether you're watching on YouTube or Spotify or Apple Podcasts. So will you come back? Can we get a hard, back you into a corner and have you back on once the rosters are in place and we can actually talk about those things.
Absolutely. You'll
Awesome.
never see me. You'll never see me refuse a chance to talk about women's hockey. That's for sure.
Great. That's so nice to hear. All right. Well, we'll let you go. Have a great afternoon. Good luck covering the Victoire from over there and keep us posted on what you learn. Again, don't forget to follow Jared on social media and eyesontheprize.com, where you'll see a lot of great articles and interviews on the Montreal Victoire. So until next time, that's it for this episode. Thanks again. We'll see you later.
PWHL Puck Drop Podcast.